Hello, people. I finished a book. Shake Hands with the Devil, subtitled The Failure of Humanity in Rwanda. This is my third book about the Rwandan genocide. I find it fascinating, and any long-time viewer will know that atrocity is a real page turner for me. This was a pretty good book. This guy Romeo Dallaire, I don't really know how to pronounce that last name. The book is more about him than it is about the genocide. He kind of tells his life story. He even goes into his parents and his family and everything. So it's kind of a biography, but most of it takes place in Rwanda. Let me get to my notes here. He spends a good part of his life in Quebec, and he writes about it. And in the 70s, there was this Quebec separatist movement. I mean, I was alive in the 70s, and I don't remember any of this shit. There was, the Canadian government had to deploy the army. There was kidnappings and murders and all kinds of shit. I don't remember any of that. I dimly remember something going on. The book was published in 2004. It's 522 pages. And I have the second and third paragraph on page 47. And I believe that this is just kind of a nutshell explanation of what's going on. What happened in Rwanda. We trace the roots of the current hostilities back to the early 20th century and Belgian colonial rule. There's, colonialism fucking things up again. When the Belgians chased the Germans out of the territory in 1916, they discovered that two groups of people shared the land. The Tutsis, who were tall and quite light-skinned, herded cattle. The shorter, darker Hutus farmed vegetable plots. The Belgians viewed the minority Tutsis as closer in kind to Europeans and elevated them to positions of power over the majority Hutu, which exacerbated the feudal state of peasant Hutus and overlord Tutsis. Enlisting the Tutsis allowed the Belgians to develop and exploit a vast network of coffee and tea plantations without the inconvenience of war or the expense of deploying a large colonial service. Rwanda achieved independence in 1962 after a popular uprising slaughtered or drove out the Tutsi elite and installed a Hutu-dominated government led by the charismatic Gregor Kayibanda. Over the next decade, a series of violent pogroms further targeted the Tutsi population of Rwanda, and many more fled to the neighboring states of Uganda, Burundi, and Zaire, where they led a precarious existence as stateless refugees. Bottom of page 84. So this looks like I have to search for this. And I don't see it. But this one, it starts out, Rwanda was on nobody's radar. Rwanda was on nobody's radar because nobody cared about Rwanda. There's no oil, there's no, it didn't mean anything to the Western powers. Dallaire gets an informant. He's in Rwanda with a UN force. He's in command of the UN force. And the UN force is woefully inadequate. They don't even have water or food, or nearly enough troops. They're trying to not only stop the genocide, but they're trying to keep apart the two warring factions. There's a guy named Kagame, and Kagame is like a military genius. He leads the expatriate Tutsis back into Rwanda and chases out the Hutu-dominated army, which is, the Hutu army is a little bit inept, and Kagame with his Tutsi-dominated army is pretty. He's a fucking military genius. Not only are there Tutsis in his army, but there's moderate Hutus also. The Informant, page 142. Third paragraph. I don't know. I'm just going to skip that one. He had an informant that was telling him what was going on. And not only was there this Hutu army, but there was a police force that was Hutu dominated. And there was also these extremist groups that were Hutu dominated. And when the when the massacre began, these paramilitary groups would set up roadblocks. Anybody trying to flee the massacre would get checked. Everybody had identity cards. They could tell right away. They could kind of tell by looking whether somebody was a Tutsi. But they had identity cards, and they would just move you off the road and slaughter you. Everywhere that they went, there was dead bodies. There was houses full of dead bodies. There was churches full of dead bodies. There was rivers and creeks full of dead bodies. Bridges would actually begin to be damaged because of floating dead bodies getting jammed underneath them. The book, I think I said this in the beginning, the book it's really about Dallier. This was probably a good exercise for him to write this book, to get rid of the demons that lived inside him. He feels like he failed. The whole time he was there, the massacre is still going on. It never stops. He didn't have the tools that he needed to stop it. He had some tiny victories where he saved some people, but many times they would receive a report of people holed up in a house. And one time they even went to a house, knocked on the door, nobody answered the door, the people were too afraid, they were hiding. And the next time they went back, they found them all dead. But they did have a few victories where they were able to get a shitload of Tutsis out of harm's way, get them beyond the lines of battle. Because the whole time this is going on, there's this rebel force of Tutsis fighting the Hutu-dominated army. It's a little bit complicated, but not really. So my note here is many excuses. It's a bit tedious reading all of Dallier's excuses, but he puts that in there for a reason. Some Belgian troops get killed. They're the only troops that are armed in the beginning. There's not very many of them. And when the shit really hits the fan, Dallier is out trying to stop, trying to get between all these groups of people, and he's walking in this camp, and he sees the pile of dead Belgian troops. There's 10 of them. He has their names in the beginning of this book. He kind of dedicates the book to those 10 dead men. It comes up again and again in the book, the fact that he saw them and he wasn't able to do anything. There's also a woman named Agathi, and in the Rwandan constitution, she's supposed to take charge after Habyarimana is killed. Habyarimana is killed in an airplane explosion. His plane is just about to land at the airport in Kigali, and the plane blows up. At the time of the writing, nope, they still don't know what the hell happened to that airplane. But the Hutu president, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Habyarimana, something like that. He is killed in this plane crash, and that really ignites the whole powder keg. Agathi calls up Dallier and her family and everything, begging to be rescued. By the time they get there, it's a slaughterhouse. There is a Radio Rwanda, and it is hate radio. The call letters are RTLM. There's a lot of acronyms in this book. The hate radio broadcasts during the whole time, urging people to kill Tutsis, urging people to kill moderate Hutus, urging people to fire on the UN forces. The hate radio, I couldn't help thinking, is not unsimilar to some of the hate broadcasts, not just radio, but social media that's going on in our country right now. This hate radio referred to the Tutsis as cockroaches. Second paragraph, page 303. He is touring a hospital. There was no water and very little food, with nothing to cook it in and next to no wood to heat it. As I walked among the sick, they were begging on their knees, pulling at my clothes, holding their babies up to me. I had nothing to ease their plight. I was guided by a few of the leaders to the site where a large mortar bomb had exploded the day before. The group had been only lightly disturbed because the impact fuse, most likely the ground had been only lightly disturbed because the impact fuse most likely hit some humans first and exploded instantaneously, spreading a maximum of shrapnel at surface level. There were traces of flesh, brain, and blood in the immediate area. Dozens of shredded bodies had been moved and buried. There were over 100 people still alive who had horrific gashes from the shrapnel. There had been a panic to get inside the hospital itself, and children had been trampled to death. Fights had broken out for space, but in the end everyone had settled down again because they had nowhere else to go. If they went beyond the compound fence, they would be killed. Death was all around them, and now death had started to invade from the sky. I wanted to scream, to vomit, to hit something, to break free of my body, to end this terrible scene. Instead, I struggled to compose myself, knowing composure was critical with so many despairing eyes upon me. I thanked the medical teams for their effort and promised them all the supplies as soon as I could get them. These hospitals are full of people fleeing the massacre squads. There's so many people there that they have to keep them outside, inside of a fence. And directly outside of the fence are people there holding guns ready to kill them. Third paragraph, 401. We continued along lanes and paths. This is them driving around. They had a hard time even getting vehicles for this mission. We continued along lanes and paths that often took us through the middle of villages that did not appear on any map. In one village, we stopped to wait for all the vehicles to catch up to us. The path we were on had been one of the exit trails used by people fleeing Kigali. There were remnants of a barrier here, and many people had been killed and thrown in the ditches on the sides of the road. As I got out to wait, I looked at the bodies, which seemed relatively fresh. Just as I glimpsed the body of a child, it moved. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, but I saw the twitching of the child and wanted to help. I leaned down to pick the child up, and suddenly I was holding a little body that was both tingling and mushy in my hands. In a second I realized that the movement was not the child, but the action of maggots. I was frozen, not wanting to fling the child away from me, but also not wanting to hold it for a second longer. I managed to set the body down and then stood there shaky, not wanting to think about what was on my hands. And then my next note is this book is about Dalier. Second paragraph, 467. And as always, I'm trying to keep this video short, but I can't keep it short and do the book justice. Where are we at here? Second paragraph. Around this time, the little sleep I got at night began to be completely invaded by nightmares of these children's accusing eyes, or gruesome scenes that I blocked out of my mind shortly after I witnessed them. or the ugly consequences of decisions I'd taken. My dreams often brought back in ghastly detail the 10 dead Belgian soldiers piled in a bloody heap by the morgue door in that terrible hospital courtyard. Towards the end of the book, Dalliere is removed from command before the American relief effort starts. He only mentions the American relief effort a few times. The Americans, this is during the Clinton administration, start to act too slowly, and they act clumsily, and we overreact and send all this food and aid. And the food and aid that we send actually goes to the people who have committed the genocide. It doesn't go to the Tutsis. It goes to the Hutus who have now been driven from the country. We feed the people who have just killed 800,000. That's it. Thanks for watching.